Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the blood-soaked streets of ancient Rome, where justice wasn't just served. It was performed as elaborate public theater designed to entertain crowds while terrorizing potential criminals into submission. Picture this. You're standing in the Forum Romanum on a typical afternoon around 100 CE, surrounded by thousands of Romans who've gathered not for shopping or political speeches, but to watch fellow human beings suffer and die in ways so creatively brutal that modern horror movies would seem like children's bedtime stories in comparison. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and roasted meat from food vendors who've learned that public executions create excellent business opportunities for enterprising entrepreneurs. The Roman approach to criminal justice was based on the revolutionary concept that punishment should serve multiple purposes simultaneously, deterring future crimes, entertaining the masses, demonstrating imperial power, and providing educational opportunities for citizens to learn exactly what happened to people who challenged Roman authority. You're about to discover that Roman punishments weren't just harsh. They were carefully choreographed spectacles designed by people who understood that fear was the most effective tool for maintaining social order across an empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East. Your average Roman punishment combined the efficiency of state-sponsored murder with the pageantry of religious festivals and the crowd appeal of sporting events, creating justice systems that would make modern dictators green with envy. Romans didn't just execute criminals. They turned executions into must-see entertainment that drew larger crowds than gladiator games and chariot races. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop that in the comments, and let's see how this Roman nightmare is reaching across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You're not just witnessing random violence. You're observing a sophisticated system of social control that used creative brutality to maintain order among millions of people who might otherwise consider rebellion against imperial authority. Roman punishments were designed by administrators who understood that the right combination of public spectacle and genuine terror could prevent more crimes than any police force or military garrison. The Roman justice system operated on the principle that punishment should be memorable, public, and proportional to both the crime and the criminal's social status, creating a complex hierarchy of suffering where your punishment depended as much on who you were as what you'd done. Slaves faced different punishments than citizens. Foreigners received different treatment than Romans, and women encountered different justice than men, making Roman law a fascinating study in systematic inequality disguised as organized fairness. Your journey through Roman punishment begins in the Forum, but it will take you to execution cliffs, underground prisons, amphitheater sands, and remote islands where Rome sent people to disappear from history, while serving as warnings to anyone who might consider challenging imperial power. You find yourself standing in formation with a Roman legion that has just suffered a devastating defeat, watching in horror as military commanders prepare to implement decimation, a punishment so mathematically precise and psychologically devastating that it turned Roman soldiers into willing participants in the execution of their own comrades. Decimation represents the perfect fusion of Roman organizational efficiency with creative brutality, transforming military discipline into a lottery of death where mathematics becomes a weapon more terrifying than any enemy sword or spear. The decimation process begins with your entire unit being divided into groups of 10 soldiers, creating small clusters of men who have fought together, shared meals together, and saved each other's lives in previous battles, but who now must participate in a ritual that will destroy 1/10 of their number through random selection and group execution. Roman military engineers understood that decimation's true power lay not in the deaths it caused, but in the psychological trauma it inflicted on survivors who were forced to kill their friends. Your group of 10 soldiers draws lots from a helmet.
knowing that whoever selects the marked stone will be beaten to death by the other 9 members of his unit, using clubs and stones, while military officers supervise the execution to ensure that every participant strikes lethal blows rather than attempting to spare their condemned comrade. This system transforms military punishment into participatory theater, where soldiers become both executioners and potential victims in the same ceremony. The mathematical precision of decimation creates a punishment system where exactly 10% of the offending unit dies, while 90% survive with permanent psychological scars from participating in state-sanctioned murder of their closest military companions. Roman commanders calculated that decimation survivor trauma would create more disciplined soldiers than traditional punishments, because survivors would never forget that military failure can force them to kill their friends. Decimation was reserved for units that displayed cowardice in battle, mutinied against officers, or deserted their posts during critical military operations, making it a punishment specifically designed for collective military failures rather than individual crimes. The Roman military justice system recognized that group punishments were more effective than individual executions for maintaining discipline among soldiers who depended on unit cohesion for battlefield survival. Your participation in decimation involves not just the possibility of being selected for death, but the certainty of being forced to murder a friend if someone else draws the fatal lot, creating a punishment system where everyone suffers regardless of whether they live or die. Roman military psychology understood that survivors of decimation would never again consider group resistance to military authority, because they'd experienced firsthand the consequences of collective disobedience. The public nature of decimation served as a demonstration to other military units that Roman discipline was maintained through methods so severe that death might be preferable to the psychological trauma of survival, making decimation an effective deterrent that prevented military rebellions throughout the empire. Historians still argue whether decimation was used primarily for military discipline or political control, but its psychological effectiveness was undeniable. Decimation ceremonies included religious elements where military chaplains blessed the execution process and declared the deaths necessary for maintaining divine favor in future battles, transforming murder into sacred ritual that combined military necessity with spiritual obligation. The religious framework made decimation seem like divine justice rather than arbitrary brutality. Your decimation experience reveals how Rome transformed mathematical concepts into tools of terror, using probability and statistics to create punishment systems that were simultaneously fair and horrifying, random and systematic, individual and collective. You're being dragged up the winding path to the Tarpeian Rock, a 70-foot cliff on the Capitoline Hill that serves as Rome's most dramatic execution site, where traitors and enemies of the state take their final walk before plummeting to their death on the jagged stones below. The Tarpeian Rock represents Roman engineering applied to the simple concept of gravity, creating an execution method that combines the efficiency of instant death with the theatrical spectacle of public entertainment that draws crowds of Romans eager to watch justice served with maximum dramatic impact. Your climb to the execution cliff reveals the careful planning that went into Roman capital punishment, as the winding path provides multiple opportunities for condemned criminals to contemplate their approaching death, while crowds of spectators gather below to witness the final moment when gravity completes the judicial process. The Romans understood that the anticipation of death was often more terrifying than death itself, making the slow climb to the Tarpeian Rock an essential part of the punishment, rather than simply transportation to the execution site. The Tarpeian Rock's location on the Capitoline Hill, directly adjacent to temples dedicated to Jupiter and other major Roman deities, transforms executions into religious ceremonies where criminals are literally thrown from sacred ground, making their deaths offerings to the gods who protect Rome from internal and external enemies. This religious framework provided spiritual justification for what was essentially state-sponsored murder, disguised as divine justice. Your fellow condemned criminals include political traitors, military deserters, and various enemies of the Roman state who have been sentenced to death by being hurled from the cliff. But the Tarpeian Rock was specifically reserved for crimes against the state rather than ordinary criminal offenses like theft or assault.
Roman law distinguished between private crimes that harmed individuals and public crimes that threatened imperial security, with the Tarpeian Rock serving as the ultimate punishment for political offenses. The execution process involves being pushed or thrown from the cliff edge by Roman executioners who ensure that condemned criminals achieve maximum velocity during their fall, guaranteeing instant death upon impact with the rocks below, while providing spectacular visual entertainment for crowds gathered in the forum. Roman executioners were skilled professionals who understood the physics of gravity and the entertainment value of dramatic deaths. Survival from a Tarpeian Rock execution was considered impossible due to the height of the cliff and the rocky terrain below. But Roman historians recorded a few miraculous cases where condemned criminals survived the fall, leading to legal debates about whether survival indicated divine intervention that required pardoning the criminal or simply necessitated a second execution attempt. Historians still argue whether survival stories were historical fact or legendary propaganda designed to demonstrate Roman mercy. Your final moments on the Tarpeian Rock include the opportunity to make last statements to the crowd below, creating dramatic performances where condemned criminals could achieve a form of immortality through memorable final words that would be repeated throughout Rome for generations. Some criminals used their final speeches to curse their enemies, while others proclaimed their innocence or declared their loyalty to foreign powers. The Tarpeian Rock's name derives from the legendary Tarpeia, a Roman woman who betrayed the city to enemy forces and was crushed to death by the shields of the soldiers she helped, making the execution site itself a monument to the consequences of treason and betrayal. This mythological foundation provided historical justification for using the cliff as an execution site specifically for traitors and political criminals. The practical advantages of cliff executions included the certainty of death, the minimal cost of the execution method, and the dramatic visual impact that made Tarpeian Rock executions more memorable and effective as deterrents than other forms of capital punishment that might seem less spectacular or final. You're being nailed to a wooden cross on the Via Appia, where crucifixion transforms dying into a multi-day public performance designed to maximize suffering while serving as a roadside advertisement for Roman power that travelers will encounter for miles in either direction. Crucifixion represents the pinnacle of Roman punishment engineering, combining medical knowledge of human anatomy with psychological understanding of terror, to create a death so slow and agonizing that the mere threat of crucifixion was often sufficient to prevent rebellion among Rome's subject populations. Your crucifixion begins with a ritual flogging that weakens your body and creates open wounds that will become infected during the extended dying process, while Roman soldiers drive iron nails through your wrists and feet, using techniques developed through years of practice on thousands of previous victims. The Romans discovered that nailing victims through the wrists rather than the palms provided better structural support for the body's weight, while ensuring that the crucified person could survive long enough to provide maximum entertainment value. The cross itself represents sophisticated engineering designed to prolong suffering while preventing escape, with horizontal crossbeams positioned at heights that force victims to support their body weight through their nailed limbs while struggling to breathe through damaged respiratory systems. Roman carpenters specialized in building crosses that would support human bodies for days without allowing victims to die quickly from blood loss or suffocation. Your fellow crucifixion victims include slaves, rebels, pirates, and various other criminals who represent the lowest levels of Roman society, making crucifixion a class-specific punishment that was legally forbidden for Roman citizens regardless of their crimes. The Roman legal system reserved crucifixion for non-citizens, ensuring that the most horrible death was inflicted only on people who lacked political protection and legal standing. The medical aspects of crucifixion involve a complex process of physiological breakdown, where victims die slowly from a combination of blood loss, infection, dehydration, and respiratory failure that can take anywhere from hours to days, depending on the victim's physical condition and the specific crucifixion techniques employed. Roman executioners understood human anatomy well enough to control the dying process and extend suffering for maximum psychological impact. Crucifixion sites along major Roman roads served as permanent galleries of rotting corpses that demonstrated imperial power to travelers while providing ongoing entertainment for local populations who could visit execution sites to watch criminals die slowly over extended periods. The Romans understood that crucifixion's effectiveness as a deterrent depended on maximum visibility and prolonged exposure of the dying process. Your crucifixion experience includes periods of delirium, hallucination, and extreme physical agony, punctuated by brief moments of consciousness, where you can observe other victims at various stages of the dying process, creating a nightmarish educational experience about the consequences of challenging Roman authority. The extended dying process provided multiple opportunities for psychological torture and public humiliation. The religious and cultural significance of crucifixion in Roman society made it more than simple execution. It was a ritual purification of the social order through the elimination of undesirable elements, combined with public demonstration of state power that reinforced social hierarchies and political authority. Crucifixion ceremonies included elements of religious sacrifice and public theater. Roman soldiers assigned to crucifixion duty developed professional expertise in prolonging suffering while preventing premature death, making crucifixion execution a specialized military skill that required training in human anatomy, engineering, and crowd management. Professional executioners took pride in their ability to keep victims alive for extended periods. Historians still argue whether crucifixion was primarily intended as punishment or psychological warfare, but its effectiveness in maintaining Roman control over diverse populations suggests that the terror generated by crucifixion was more valuable than the actual deaths it caused. You're standing naked in the arena sand while exotic beasts from across the Roman Empire circle around you, preparing for a punishment spectacle that transforms criminal execution into elaborate theatrical productions where you become an unwilling actor in carefully choreographed death scenes designed to entertain bloodthirsty crowds. The arena beast battles represent Roman entertainment engineering at its most sophisticated, combining zoological expertise with theatrical staging to create executions that doubled as educational demonstrations about imperial power and exotic wildlife from conquered territories. Your animal opponents include lions from North Africa, bears from Germania, leopards from Asia, and various other predators that have been imported at enormous expense specifically for arena executions, making your death an incredibly costly spectacle that demonstrates Rome's wealth and logistical capabilities. Roman beast hunting expeditions traveled throughout the empire, capturing animals specifically for arena use, creating an international wildlife trade dedicated entirely to providing entertainment through human-animal combat. The arena staging involves elaborate sets and props that transform the amphitheater floor into forests, deserts, or other natural environments where your execution takes place within themed productions that might recreate famous hunting scenes, mythological stories, or historical battles between humans and animals. Roman stage designers specialized in creating realistic environments that enhanced the theatrical impact of beast executions, while providing educational entertainment about geography and natural history. Your fellow condemned criminals are dressed as specific characters from mythology or history, forcing you to participate in narrative productions where your death serves as the climax of elaborate stories performed for audiences who understand the cultural references and appreciate the dramatic irony of watching criminals die while reenacting famous tales. These productions required significant planning and rehearsal to ensure that the stories unfolded correctly, despite the unpredictable nature of terrified animals and desperate humans. The animal training process involves starving beasts for days before arena performances to ensure maximum aggression during executions, while animal handlers use various techniques to direct predator behavior and create dramatic confrontations that provide optimal entertainment value for spectators. Roman animal trainers developed sophisticated methods for controlling wild beasts in arena environments, while maintaining the appearance of natural predator behavior. Beast execution ceremonies included religious elements where priests blessed the animals and declared their participation in executions as sacred activities that honored the gods through ritual sacrifice of criminals.
transforming murder into religious observance that provided spiritual justification for entertainment based on human suffering. The religious framework made beast executions seem like divine justice rather than sadistic entertainment. Your survival strategy in beast combat involves understanding animal behavior well enough to avoid immediate death while providing sufficient entertainment to satisfy crowds who expect dramatic performances rather than quick kills, making beast executions a complex form of improvisational theater where your acting skills might determine whether you die quickly or slowly. Some criminals survived beast encounters through superior performance that pleased audiences enough to grant mercy. The economic aspects of beast executions included significant costs for animal acquisition, transportation, feeding, and training, making arena beast battles expensive entertainment that demonstrated imperial wealth while providing economic opportunities for animal suppliers, trainers, and various support personnel. The beast execution industry created jobs throughout the empire while consuming enormous resources. Arena beast battles served educational purposes by introducing Roman audiences to exotic animals from conquered territories, making executions into natural history lessons that combined entertainment with geographical education about the empire's vast territorial holdings. Spectators learned about foreign lands through watching animals from those regions kill condemned criminals.
The psychological impact of beast executions on both participants and spectators created complex emotional responses where entertainment and horror were simultaneously experienced, making arena beast battles more psychologically sophisticated than simple executions, while providing cathartic experiences that reinforced social boundaries and imperial power. Historians still argue whether arena beast battles were primarily entertainment or political control mechanisms, but their popularity and expense suggest that Romans valued the psychological and cultural benefits of watching criminals die in elaborate animal combat scenarios. You're being led down stone steps into an underground chamber where Vestal virgins who have broken their sacred vows face the most terrifying punishment in Roman religion: being buried alive in a small cell with just enough food and water to prolong the agony while the earth slowly claims your life. Living burial represents the intersection of Roman religious law and creative cruelty, designed specifically for sacred priestesses whose sexual transgressions were considered so catastrophic that ordinary execution would contaminate the executioners and anger the gods who protected Rome from destruction. Your underground tomb consists of a small chamber carved into rock beneath the city, equipped with a bed, a lamp, and minimal supplies that create the illusion of mercy, while ensuring that your death will be slow, terrifying, and completely isolated from human contact. The Romans believed that direct execution of a Vestal virgin would bring divine curse upon the city. So living burial allowed the gods themselves to complete the execution while keeping human hands technically clean of sacred blood. The Vestal virgin punishment system reflects Rome's complex relationship with female sexuality and religious authority, where women who wielded enormous spiritual power through their virginity faced the ultimate penalty when that power was compromised through sexual activity. Vestal virgins served as intermediaries between Rome and its gods, making their sexual purity essential for maintaining divine protection of the empire, while their punishment needed to match the cosmic significance of their transgression. Your burial ceremony includes elaborate religious rituals where priests perform purification rites and make offerings to the gods, while crowds of Romans gather to witness the sealing of your tomb, transforming execution into a religious festival that combines entertainment with spiritual cleansing of the community. The ceremony serves to purify Rome from the contamination caused by the Vestal's sexual transgression, while providing public demonstration of divine justice. The underground chamber where you await death has been used for previous Vestal virgin executions, creating a sacred execution site where the spirits of previously buried priestesses are believed to linger while awaiting divine judgment in the afterlife.
Roman religious tradition held that the underground chamber was a threshold between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, making it an appropriate location for executions that involved divine rather than human justice. Your food and water supplies are calculated to last several days, ensuring that you have time to contemplate your sins and possibly receive divine forgiveness before death, while the isolation prevents any human intervention that might interfere with divine justice. The Romans believed that gods might choose to spare a truly innocent Vestal Virgin through miraculous intervention, making the punishment a form of divine trial as well as execution. The psychological torture of living burial involves the gradual realization that no rescue is possible while you slowly consume your limited supplies in complete darkness and silence. Knowing that your death will be slow and that your body will remain entombed forever as a monument to the consequences of breaking sacred vows. The isolation creates mental anguish that supplements the physical suffering of slow death. Living burial ceremonies attracted enormous crowds of Romans who viewed Vestal Virgin executions as once-in-a-lifetime religious spectacles that combined entertainment with spiritual significance, making these rare punishments major public events that reinforced social values and religious authority. The rarity of Vestal Virgin crimes made their punishments extraordinarily memorable and effective as deterrents. The legal process leading to living burial involved complex religious trials where evidence was evaluated by priests and senior religious authorities rather than ordinary courts, creating specialized justice systems that reflected the unique spiritual status of Vestal Virgins and the cosmic significance of their potential crimes. These religious trials operated according to different standards of evidence and punishment than secular courts. Historians still argue whether living burial was intended primarily as religious purification or political control of female sexuality, but the punishment's religious framework clearly distinguished it from ordinary criminal executions while serving the broader social function of reinforcing gender roles and religious authority through spectacular punishment of women who violated sacred sexual boundaries. You're being sewn into a large leather sack along with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, preparing for the Poena Culli, Rome's most bizarre and symbolically complex punishment reserved specifically for parricides who have murdered their fathers or close family members. The sack of parricide represents Roman legal creativity at its most inventive, combining practical execution with elaborate symbolic messaging about the cosmic horror of family murder, while providing entertainment that's educational about both justice and natural history. Your animal companions in the leather sack have been carefully selected for their symbolic significance in Roman culture. Where dogs represent loyalty betrayed, roosters symbolize vigilance ignored, vipers embody treachery, and monkeys represent the bestial nature that humans display when they violate natural law. The Romans believed that parricides had violated the fundamental order of nature, making it appropriate that they die in the company of animals while being returned to the chaotic natural state from which civilization had emerged. The sewing process involves skilled leather workers who ensure that the sack is completely sealed, except for air holes that will allow you to survive long enough to experience the full horror of being trapped with terrified animals in a confined space before the entire package is thrown into the Tiber River. Roman executioners understood that the psychological terror of anticipating drowning while fighting panicked animals was as important as the actual death for creating maximum deterrent effect. Your parricide trial required specific evidence and testimony that proved you had deliberately murdered a family member rather than killing them accidentally or in self-defense, making parricide prosecutions complex legal proceedings that distinguished between different types of family violence. Roman law recognized that family murder violated both human law and divine order, requiring special punishments that reflected the cosmic significance of destroying the family bonds that formed the foundation of Roman society. The animal selection for parricide sacks sometimes varied based on availability and regional preferences, with some executions including wolves, snakes, or other creatures that were locally associated with wildness and violation of natural order. But the principle remained consistent that parricides should die in the company of beasts
that represented their own bestial nature. The animal symbolism provided educational content about moral philosophy and natural law. Your sack journey to the river involves being transported through Roman streets while crowds gather to witness the rare spectacle of parricide punishment, creating public processions that combined entertainment with moral instruction about the consequences of family murder. These processions served as mobile moral lessons that reached larger audiences than stationary executions, while reinforcing social values about family loyalty and respect for parental authority. The drowning process ensures that your death occurs through a combination of suffocation, animal attacks, and water, creating a complex execution method where multiple forces combine to kill you while providing symbolic representation of the chaos that results when natural order is violated through family murder. Roman legal theorists believed that parricides deserved deaths that reflected the cosmic disruption they had caused through their crimes. Parricide prosecutions were relatively rare in Roman history, making sack executions extraordinary events that drew enormous crowds and generated extensive discussion about family relationships, legal justice, and moral philosophy throughout Roman society. The rarity of these punishments made them particularly memorable and effective as deterrents against family violence. The religious aspects of parricide punishment included rituals where priests declared that the execution was necessary to restore cosmic balance and prevent divine retribution against Rome for harboring family murderers, transforming bizarre executions into necessary religious observances that protected the entire community from supernatural consequences. The religious framework provided spiritual justification for what appeared to be creative sadism. Historical records suggest that some condemned parricides were offered alternative punishments if they confessed their crimes and showed appropriate remorse. But most chose the sack rather than face other execution methods that were considered more painful or humiliating, making the sack punishment both terrible and preferable to alternatives. Historians still argue whether the symbolic complexity of parricide punishment reflected genuine Roman moral philosophy or simply provided intellectual justification for sadistic entertainment. But the elaborate ritual framework clearly distinguished parricide executions from ordinary criminal punishments. You're being marched in chains to a gladiator school where criminal punishment transforms into an entertainment career, with death as the only retirement plan. Discovering that Rome's justice system could sentence you to years of brutal training, followed by public combat that would either kill you quickly or slowly, depending on your performance skills and crowd appeal. Gladiator school slavery represents Roman efficiency in converting criminal punishment into profitable entertainment, while providing condemned criminals with slim chances of survival through superior fighting abilities and theatrical performance. Your gladiator training begins with assessment of your physical capabilities, fighting experience, and entertainment potential. As Roman trainers evaluate new criminal recruits to determine which combat specialties might maximize both survival chances and audience appeal during arena performances. The Gladiator School operates as a combination military academy, theater school, and death camp, where criminals learn sophisticated fighting techniques while preparing for public executions disguised as sporting events. The training regimen includes weapons instruction, physical conditioning, and performance coaching designed to transform ordinary criminals into skilled entertainers who can provide satisfying spectacles for Roman audiences who expect gladiatorial combat to combine genuine skill with dramatic presentation. Roman gladiator trainers understood that successful arena performers needed both fighting ability and theatrical talent to survive long enough to achieve fame and possible freedom. Your fellow gladiator slaves include criminals from throughout the Roman Empire who represent different fighting traditions, cultural backgrounds, and combat specialties that will be matched against each other in arena performances designed to showcase the diversity of Rome's territorial conquests while providing educational entertainment about foreign military techniques. The gladiator schools served as international military academies where combat knowledge from conquered peoples was preserved and displayed. The gladiator school's economic structure involves significant investment in training, equipment, and medical care. for criminal slaves who represent valuable entertainment assets that generate profits through arena performances, making gladiator slavery a business enterprise that balanced punishment with commercial entertainment. Successful gladiator schools could afford better training facilities, medical care, and equipment that improved their fighters. Survival chances. Your daily routine includes combat training with various weapons, physical conditioning exercises, and rehearsal of dramatic scenarios that will be performed during arena spectacles where your survival depends on providing satisfactory entertainment for audiences who control your fate through their applause or disapproval. Gladiator training was essentially preparation for interactive theater, where audience participation determined whether performers lived or died. The medical care available in gladiator schools reflects the economic value of trained fighters, with school physicians providing better treatment than most Romans received because injured gladiators represented damaged investment property that needed maintenance to continue generating profits. Gladiator schools employed skilled doctors who specialized in treating combat injuries and maintaining fighter health. Your combat specialization will be determined by your physical characteristics and fighting aptitude, with different gladiator types requiring specific training in particular weapons and fighting styles that appeal to different audience preferences during arena spectacles. The variety of gladiator specialties provided diverse entertainment options while allowing fighters to develop expertise in combat forms that matched their natural abilities. The possibility of earning freedom through exceptional arena performance provides motivation for gladiator slaves who might survive long enough to achieve manumission through superior fighting skills and crowd appeal. But most criminal gladiators died within their first few arena appearances. Freedom was theoretically possible, but practically unlikely for most gladiator slaves. Gladiator school culture includes complex social hierarchies where veteran fighters mentor newcomers, while competing for the best equipment, medical care, and combat opportunities that might lead to fame and eventual freedom, creating educational environments where survival knowledge was shared among criminals facing similar fates. The psychological preparation for gladiatorial combat involves accepting the certainty of eventual death, while developing the performance skills and fighting abilities that might delay that death long enough to achieve some measure of fame or comfort during the final period of life. Historians still argue whether gladiator schools provided genuine opportunities for criminal rehabilitation or simply created more elaborate methods of execution. But the training and medical care provided to gladiator slaves was superior to treatment received by most other categories of Roman criminals. You're descending into the suffocating darkness of Roman salt mines, where criminal punishment involves disappearing into the earth's depths to extract valuable minerals through back-breaking labor that will almost certainly kill you within months, but slowly enough to generate significant economic value from your dying body. Salt mine sentences represent Roman efficiency in converting criminal punishment into profitable mining operations, while ensuring that condemned criminals suffer prolonged deaths in underground environments that serve as living tombs for people the empire wants to eliminate gradually. Your underground workplace consists of narrow tunnels carved into rock salt deposits, where you'll spend 18 hours daily wielding primitive tools in cramped spaces with minimal ventilation, while breathing toxic dust that will destroy your respiratory system and cause slow death through lung disease that might take months or years to complete. Roman mining operations prioritized mineral extraction over worker safety, making salt mines essentially underground execution chambers disguised as economic enterprises. The salt mine workforce includes criminals, political prisoners, war captives, and various other undesirable people whom Rome wants to eliminate while extracting maximum economic value from their deaths, creating diverse underground communities where people from different backgrounds share the common experience of slow death through industrial labor. These mining communities developed their own cultures and social structures within the context of systematic exploitation and gradual murder. Your daily routine involves awakening before dawn in underground sleeping quarters, eating minimal rations designed to maintain work capacity without providing adequate nutrition for long-term survival, then spending most of your waking hours extracting salt through physical labor that destroys your body while generating profits for Roman mine owners. The work schedule was calculated to maximize short-term productivity while ensuring that workers died before becoming economic burdens. The mining tools available to you include primitive picks, shovels, and hammers that require enormous physical effort to use effectively, while causing repetitive stress injuries that will accumulate over time until you become unable to work and are left to die in underground chambers where deceased workers are simply abandoned. Roman mining technology prioritized low costs and high extraction rates over worker safety or equipment quality. Your underground living conditions include shared sleeping spaces in mine shafts, contaminated water sources, and minimal food supplies that create environments where disease spreads rapidly between workers, while medical care is non-existent except for basic treatments that might keep workers alive long enough to continue mining operations. The living conditions were designed to maintain work capacity while ensuring eventual death through gradual deterioration. The salt extraction process involves working in environments where the mineral dust creates respiratory problems, skin irritation, and eye damage that accumulate into chronic health conditions requiring medical treatment that isn't available to criminal workers, making salt mining a form of slow poisoning disguised as industrial labor. The toxic effects of salt dust were well known, but considered acceptable costs of mining operations. Mine discipline includes brutal punishment for workers who fail to meet daily extraction quotas, attempt to escape, or show signs of rebellious behavior, with punishments ranging from reduced food rations to physical beatings that often prove fatal for workers who are already weakened by malnutrition and toxic exposure. Mine supervisors used terror to maintain productivity among workers who had little incentive to cooperate. Your chances of survival in salt mines depend partly on your physical condition upon arrival, but mostly on random factors like cave-ins, equipment accidents, disease outbreaks, and various other hazards that kill workers regardless of their health, strength, or work performance, making salt mine survival essentially a matter of luck rather than skill or effort. The economic value generated by salt mine operations provided significant profits for Roman investors, while creating essential resources for food preservation, military operations, and various industrial processes that supported imperial expansion and domestic prosperity, making criminal mining labor an important component of Roman economic success. Historians still argue whether salt mine sentences were primarily intended as punishment or economic exploitation, but the high mortality rates and harsh working conditions clearly indicate that these operations functioned as elaborate execution methods that generated profits while eliminating undesirable populations. You're being bound to a wooden post in the forum, while Roman executioners prepare their leather whips for a public flogging ceremony that transforms corporal punishment into theatrical performance, designed to entertain crowds while demonstrating the consequences of challenging imperial authority. Public flogging represents Roman expertise in converting physical torture into educational entertainment that combines genuine suffering with dramatic spectacle, creating punishment ceremonies that serve multiple social functions simultaneously while providing afternoon entertainment for Roman citizens seeking exciting diversions. Your flogging implements include various types of whips designed for different levels of damage and entertainment value, ranging from simple leather straps that cause pain without permanent injury to flagella embedded with metal fragments that tear flesh and create spectacular blood displays for audiences who appreciate dramatic visual effects. Roman executioners possessed specialized knowledge about whip construction and techniques that could control the severity and duration of flogging punishments to match both the crime and the entertainment preferences of spectators. The flogging ceremony includes preliminary activities where your crimes are announced to the crowd, your punishment is explained in detail, and spectators are encouraged to participate through cheering, jeering, and providing commentary about the appropriateness of the sentence being administered. These preliminary activities transform individual punishment into community events where Roman citizens participate in the justice process while enjoying entertainment that reinforces social values and legal authority. Your public humiliation begins before the physical punishment, as you're displayed naked and vulnerable to crowds who examine your body
discuss your crimes, and make predictions about your ability to survive the upcoming ordeal. Creating psychological torture that supplements the physical suffering while providing entertainment that appeals to audiences who enjoy seeing social inferiors suffer public degradation. The psychological aspects of public flogging were considered as important as the physical punishment for deterring future crimes. A flogging technique involves skilled executioners who understand human anatomy well enough to inflict maximum pain while controlling the severity of injuries to ensure that you survive long enough to provide satisfactory entertainment for audiences who expect dramatic performances rather than quick deaths. Roman executioners took professional pride in their ability to calibrate punishment severity according to crowd expectations and legal requirements. Your endurance during flogging becomes part of the entertainment as spectators evaluate your pain tolerance, courage, and dramatic reactions to physical torture, creating interactive theater where your performance influences audience satisfaction and potentially affects the severity of punishment through crowd pressure on executioners. Some criminals achieved audience sympathy through superior performance that reduced their punishment, while others received additional flogging for failing to provide satisfactory entertainment. The medical aspects of public flogging include knowledge about pain thresholds, blood loss limits, and recovery times that allow executioners to inflict severe punishment without causing immediate death, making flogging a precise form of torture that requires understanding of human physiology and crowd psychology. Roman executioners received training in both anatomy and entertainment to maximize the effectiveness of public corporal punishment. Public flogging ceremonies serve educational purposes by demonstrating the consequences of various crimes, while providing moral instruction about social hierarchy, legal authority, and appropriate behavior for Roman citizens and subject populations. The educational content was delivered through entertainment that made moral lessons memorable and emotionally engaging for audiences of all social classes. Your recovery from flogging punishment depends on the severity of your injuries, the availability of medical treatment, and your social status, with some flogging victims receiving follow-up care while others are left to heal on their own or die from infected wounds that develop after the public ceremony concludes. The recovery process often proved more dangerous than the original flogging. The legal framework surrounding public flogging includes complex regulations about which crimes warrant corporal punishment, what types of whips can be used for different offenses, and how flogging ceremonies should be conducted to ensure both legal compliance and entertainment value for Roman audiences who expect professional execution of justice. Historians still argue whether public flogging was primarily intended as punishment or entertainment, but the elaborate ceremonial framework and audience participation clearly indicate that these events served important social functions beyond simple law enforcement. You're being loaded onto a ship bound for a barren Mediterranean island, where Roman exile transforms punishment into slow death through isolation, starvation, and psychological torture that removes you from civilization, while ensuring that your suffering continues for years rather than ending quickly through execution. Island exile represents Roman creativity in designing punishments that eliminate political threats, while avoiding the martyrdom that might result from public executions. Creating living deaths that satisfy justice while removing dangerous individuals from society permanently. Your destination island consists of rocky terrain with minimal vegetation, no natural water sources, and no human inhabitants except for previous exiles who have survived long enough to greet new arrivals, creating prison communities where political criminals face gradual death through environmental challenges that prove more effective than traditional executions. Roman authorities carefully selected exile islands that provided just enough resources to sustain life temporarily, while ensuring that long-term survival was nearly impossible. The exile process involves being stripped of your Roman citizenship, property, and legal rights before being transported to remote islands where you become legally dead while remaining physically alive, creating a unique form of punishment where social death
precedes biological death by months or years. Roman law treated exiles as non-persons who had no legal standing and could be killed by anyone without legal consequences, making exile equivalent to delayed execution with extra psychological torture. Your fellow exiles include political rivals of emperors, failed military commanders, corrupt officials, and various other high-status criminals whose public executions might create political problems for imperial authorities who prefer to eliminate threats through methods that appear merciful while ensuring eventual death. The exile population represents Roman political history in human form, with islands serving as outdoor museums of imperial enemies. The survival challenges on exile islands include finding fresh water, locating edible plants, constructing shelter from available materials, and avoiding conflicts with other exiles who compete for limited resources while facing the same environmental threats that make long-term survival nearly impossible. Exile islands became dystopian societies where civilization's veneer disappeared under survival pressure. Your daily routine involves searching for food and water, maintaining whatever shelter you can construct, and avoiding the psychological breakdown that claims many exiles who cannot adapt to isolation and deprivation after living comfortable lives in Roman society. The psychological challenges of exile often proved more deadly than the physical hardships, with many exiles choosing suicide over continued suffering. The island ecosystem provides minimal resources that can sustain small populations temporarily, but cannot support the numbers of exiles that Rome continues sending to the same islands, creating resource competition that forces exiles to choose between cooperation and conflict while facing inevitable starvation. The Roman authorities understood that overcrowding exile islands would accelerate death rates while maintaining the appearance of merciful punishment. Communication with the outside world is essentially impossible from exile islands, making your punishment a form of social death where you disappear from history while remaining alive long enough to contemplate your fall from power and the political changes occurring in Rome without your participation. The isolation was designed to prevent exiles from organizing resistance or maintaining political influence. Your legal status as an exile means that return to Roman territory is punishable by immediate execution, making escape from exile islands pointless because survival requires remaining in exile forever or facing certain death if discovered in Roman territories. The legal framework ensured that exile was permanent punishment that could only end in death. Historical examples of exile survival include rare cases where exiles managed to establish sustainable communities, find ways to communicate with supporters, or even achieve eventual pardons that allowed return to Roman society. But these success stories were exceptional rather than typical outcomes. Most exiles died within months of arrival on their designated islands. The economic aspects of exile punishment include minimal costs for transportation and supervision compared to the expenses involved in maintaining prisoners or conducting elaborate executions, making island exile an efficient method for eliminating political threats while conserving imperial resources for more productive purposes. Historians still argue whether Roman exile was primarily intended as merciful alternative to execution or as particularly cruel form of torture. But the high mortality rates and psychological suffering clearly indicate that exile functioned as delayed execution with additional torment. You're being strapped to a massive wooden wheel where Roman executioners will systematically break every bone in your body while crowds gather for an afternoon of entertainment that combines the precision of engineering with the spectacle of prolonged human destruction. The breaking wheel represents Roman technological innovation applied to torture, creating execution devices that transform murder into mechanical processes designed to maximize suffering while providing educational demonstrations about the consequences of serious crimes against imperial authority. Your wheel apparatus consists of a large wooden wheel mounted horizontally on a post, with spokes positioned to support your body, while executioners use iron bars and hammers to break your limbs systematically, starting with fingers and toes before progressing to arms and legs, in sequences calculated to maintain consciousness throughout the breaking process. Roman engineers designed breaking wheels with mathematical precision, that ensured optimal angles and leverage for bone destruction while providing clear sight lines for spectators who wanted to observe every detail of the execution. The breaking process begins with careful positioning of your limbs to ensure that each bone breaks cleanly and dramatically when struck by executioners who have developed professional expertise in human anatomy and crowd entertainment, making wheel executions elaborate performances that combine genuine skill with theatrical presentation. Roman executioners understood that successful wheel breaking required both technical knowledge and showmanship to satisfy audiences who expected professional quality torture. Your wheel execution attracts large crowds who bring food, wine, and comfortable seating for extended entertainment sessions that might last several hours as executioners work methodically through your skeleton while providing running commentary about the techniques being employed and the crimes that justified such elaborate punishment. These wheel-breaking events became social gatherings where Roman families enjoyed picnic lunches while watching criminals suffer systematic destruction. The medical aspects of wheel breaking involve understanding pain thresholds, shock responses, and blood loss patterns that allow executioners to inflict maximum damage while keeping victims conscious long enough to provide satisfactory entertainment for audiences who expect dramatic reactions to systematic bone destruction. Roman wheel specialists received training in anatomy and psychology to maximize the effectiveness of their performances. Your survival during wheel breaking depends on the executioner's skill in avoiding vital organs and major blood vessels while destroying your skeletal system, creating extended dying processes where you remain conscious and responsive while experiencing levels of pain that would be impossible to endure, except for the shock responses that provide temporary relief. The wheel-breaking process was designed to balance maximum suffering with extended consciousness. The wheel execution ceremony includes religious elements where priests bless the proceedings and declare the torture necessary for maintaining divine favor, transforming systematic bone breaking into sacred activities that honor the gods while purifying the community through elimination of criminal elements. The religious framework provided spiritual justification for what appeared to be organized sadism disguised as justice. Your final position on the wheel involves being woven between the spokes, with your broken limbs arranged in patterns that create visual displays of judicial power, while your dying body serves as a monument to Roman authority that remains visible for days after death. The wheel displays served as permanent warnings about the consequences of serious crimes, while providing ongoing entertainment for people who enjoyed examining the results of systematic torture. The breaking wheel's effectiveness as a deterrent depended on the public nature of the execution and the memorable horror of watching systematic bone destruction, making wheel executions more psychologically powerful than quick deaths that might seem merciful compared to the prolonged agony of mechanical torture. The visual impact of wheel breaking created lasting impressions on witnesses who would remember the spectacle for years. Historical records indicate that some wheel victims survived the breaking process long enough to be displayed alive on their wheels for days before finally dying from infection, exposure, or organ failure, creating extended spectacles that provided ongoing entertainment while demonstrating the thoroughness of Roman justice. Historians still argue whether breaking wheel executions were primarily intended as punishment or psychological warfare, but the elaborate ceremonial framework and technical precision clearly indicate that these events served important social functions beyond simple law enforcement through the systematic destruction of human bodies for public entertainment. You're being handed crude weapons in the arena while facing other condemned criminals in gladiatorial combat, specifically designed to eliminate multiple offenders through mutual slaughter that doubles as public entertainment. Discovering that Roman efficiency could transform criminal punishment into self-executing justice systems where the condemned kill each other while crowds enjoy the spectacle. Forced gladiator combat represents Roman ingenuity in creating punishment scenarios where criminals become both executioners and victims simultaneously. reducing administrative costs while providing superior entertainment value compared to traditional individual executions. Your combat opponents include fellow criminals who face the same death sentence, but have been given the opportunity to potentially survive by killing you and other competitors in arena battles that eliminate most participants, while providing exceptional performers with chances to continue living through superior fighting skills and crowd appeal. These forced combat scenarios create desperate survival situations where criminals must choose between certain death through refusal to fight and possible survival through successful murder of other condemned individuals. The weapons provided for criminal gladiator combat include intentionally inadequate or mismatched equipment designed to prolong fights while ensuring that most participants die eventually, with arena organizers carefully calculating weapon distributions to create entertaining battles rather than quick executions. Roman weapon masters understood that successful criminal combat required balancing lethality with entertainment value to satisfy audiences who expected dramatic performances rather than efficient killing. Your arena performance becomes part of a larger entertainment program that might include beast hunts, professional gladiator matches, and various other spectacles designed to provide full days of entertainment for Roman audiences who view criminal combat as educational demonstrations about justice, courage, and the consequences of challenging imperial authority. Criminal gladiator combat served as opening acts or intermission entertainment during larger arena events. The survival strategy for forced criminal combat involves understanding both fighting techniques and crowd psychology, as your performance must satisfy audience expectations while demonstrating the skills necessary to defeat other desperate criminals who are equally motivated to survive through superior violence. Some criminal gladiators achieved crowd favor through exceptional performance that might lead to pardons or reduced sentences. Your fellow criminal combatants represent diverse backgrounds, including military deserters, political prisoners, foreign rebels, and common criminals who bring different fighting skills and survival strategies to arena combat, creating educational opportunities for audiences to observe various combat techniques while enjoying the spectacle of desperate people killing each other for entertainment. The diversity of criminal backgrounds provided varied combat styles that enhanced entertainment value. The arena staging for criminal combat includes minimal preparation compared to professional gladiator events, with simple weapon distributions and basic arena setups that focus on efficient elimination of criminal populations rather than elaborate theatrical productions, making criminal gladiator combat more economical entertainment that still provided satisfactory spectacle for audiences seeking violent entertainment. Combat training for criminal gladiators consists of basic weapon instruction designed to create competent but not exceptional fighters who can provide entertaining battles without becoming skilled enough to pose security threats if they survive their punishment, making criminal gladiator training a balance between entertainment preparation and security considerations. Your chances of survival in criminal gladiator combat depend on fighting ability, tactical intelligence, and audience appeal, but most criminal combatants die within their first arena appearance because the combat scenarios are designed to eliminate participants rather than create long-term gladiator careers. Survival was possible, but statistically unlikely for most criminal gladiators. The economic efficiency of criminal gladiator combat includes reduced execution costs, entertainment revenue from arena events, and elimination of multiple criminals through single spectacles that provide superior cost-benefit ratios compared to individual executions, while maintaining the deterrent effects of public punishment. The psychological impact of forced criminal combat on both participants and spectators creates complex emotional responses where entertainment and justice blend into experiences that reinforce social hierarchies while providing cathartic release for audiences who enjoy watching social inferiors destroy each other for their amusement. Historians still argue whether forced criminal gladiator combat was primarily intended as punishment or entertainment, but the integration of these events into larger arena programs clearly indicates that criminal elimination was subordinated to audience satisfaction in the design of these spectacles. You're being dragged before a temple tribunal where sacrilege charges trigger creative divine retribution administered by imaginative priests who view religious crimes as opportunities to demonstrate divine power through elaborate punishments that combine theological instruction with spectacular entertainment for Roman audiences who appreciate seeing blasphemers suffer appropriately symbolic torments. Temple desecration penalties represent the intersection of Roman religious authority and creative justice, transforming punishment into religious theater where your suffering becomes a demonstration of divine power and priestly authority. Your religious crimes might include stealing from temple treasuries, insulting sacred statues, performing unauthorized rituals, or violating various religious taboos that require specialized punishments reflecting the specific nature of your blasphemy against particular gods who demand appropriately symbolic retribution. Roman religious law recognized that different types of sacrilege required different forms of divine justice, creating complex punishment systems where the crime determined the specific method of religious torture. The priestly authorities overseeing your punishment include specialists in religious law who understand both theological requirements and theatrical presentation, ensuring that your divine retribution provides appropriate religious instruction while satisfying audience expectations for dramatic spectacle. These religious judges combine genuine spiritual authority with entertainment expertise to create punishment ceremonies that served multiple social functions simultaneously. Your temple punishment ceremony includes elaborate rituals where priests invoke the offended deities, explain your crimes to assembled crowds, and request divine guidance for administering appropriate justice that will restore cosmic balance while providing educational entertainment about religious authority and proper respect for sacred institutions. The ceremonial framework transforms individual punishment into community religious experience. The symbolic elements of religious punishment include retribution that mirrors your specific blasphemy, such as having your hands burned if you stole sacred objects, being forced to carry heavy religious statues if you insulted divine images, or enduring various forms of ritual humiliation that directly relate to your particular religious crimes. Roman religious justice emphasized symbolic appropriateness over simple efficiency in designing punishments that educated audiences about theological principles. Your participation in religious punishment involves not just physical suffering, but also spiritual degradation, where priests declare your contamination, perform purification rituals to protect the community from your spiritual pollution, and demonstrate divine power through your torment, while audiences learn about proper religious behavior through observing the consequences of sacrilege. Religious punishment included both physical and spiritual components that addressed the cosmic significance of religious crimes. The divine intervention aspects of religious punishment include ceremonies where priests claim to receive direct communication from offended deities who specify appropriate retribution for your crimes, creating theatrical presentations where divine will is demonstrated through priestly interpretation and punishment administration. These divine communication scenes provided religious authority for what might otherwise appear to be arbitrary cruelty. Temple punishment facilities include specialized equipment and spaces designed for religious torture that reflects the sacred nature of divine justice, while providing appropriate settings for ceremonies that combine punishment with religious instruction and entertainment. Religious punishment required different facilities and equipment than secular executions because of the ceremonial requirements and symbolic significance. Your religious punishment serves educational purposes by demonstrating the power of Roman gods, the authority of religious institutions, and the consequences of challenging sacred order, making individual punishment into broader lessons about social hierarchy, spiritual authority, and appropriate behavior toward religious institutions. The educational content was delivered through memorable spectacle that reinforced religious and social values. A recovery or continuation of punishment after religious ceremonies depends on whether priests determine that divine justice has been satisfied or requires additional retribution, creating ongoing relationships between religious authorities and punished individuals that might involve extended torment or unexpected mercy based on priestly interpretation of divine will. The integration of religious punishment with secular justice creates complex legal frameworks where crimes against gods require different procedures, evidence standards,
and punishment methods than ordinary criminal offenses, making religious law a specialized field that operates according to different principles than civil or military justice systems. Historians still argue whether Roman religious punishment was primarily intended as genuine theological justice or political control disguised as divine authority, but the elaborate ceremonial framework clearly indicates that these punishments served important social functions in maintaining religious hierarchy and spiritual authority throughout the empire. You're being stripped of your legal existence and transformed into human property through the Roman punishment of slavery, discovering that legal death can be more terrifying than biological death, because you continue living while losing all rights, protections, and social identity that previously defined your existence as a human being. Slavery as punishment represents Roman legal innovation in creating living deaths that eliminate criminal threats while converting condemned individuals into valuable economic assets, making punishment profitable for the state while providing ongoing suffering that continues indefinitely rather than ending through execution. Your transformation from citizen to slave involves elaborate legal ceremonies where magistrates formally declare your civil death, confiscate all property and possessions, and transfer ownership of your body to new masters who acquire complete control over your life, labor, and physical well-being. Roman law treated criminal slavery as a form of resurrection, where legally dead individuals were reborn as property, with no rights or protections beyond their economic value to their owners. The slave auction, where you're sold as punishment property, includes evaluation of your physical condition, work skills, and potential profitability by prospective owners who examine your body like livestock, while discussing your suitability for various forms of labor that might generate maximum return on their investment in criminal property. Criminal slaves often sold for lower prices than other slaves because of their legal history and potential behavioral problems. Your new existence as punishment slave means that every aspect of your daily life is controlled by masters who can work you to death, sell you to other owners, use you for dangerous labor, or simply kill you without facing any legal consequences because criminal slaves have no rights or legal protections under Roman law. The complete powerlessness of criminal slavery created ongoing psychological torture that supplemented whatever physical hardships masters chose to impose. The work assignments for criminal slaves include the most dangerous and unpleasant labor available in Roman society, such as mining, construction work, agricultural labor under harsh conditions, or service in occupations that free workers refuse to perform because of health risks or social stigma. Criminal slaves became the Roman economy's shock absorbers, who performed essential but deadly work that killed free workers. Your slave living conditions depend entirely on your owner's economic calculations about maintaining valuable property, with some masters providing adequate food and shelter to preserve their investment, while others work criminal slaves to death quickly to maximize short-term profits from expendable labor. The economic framework of criminal slavery created perverse incentives where your survival depended on your profitability rather than any humanitarian considerations. The legal framework surrounding criminal slavery includes complex regulations about ownership rights, transfer procedures, and treatment standards that protect masters' property interests while providing no protections for the enslaved individuals who have been legally transformed into objects rather than people. Criminal slaves existed in legal limbo where they were simultaneously human beings and property without clear resolution of the contradictions. Your family relationships are legally severed through criminal slavery, with wives, children, and relatives losing all connection to you because legally dead individuals cannot maintain family ties or social relationships that depend on legal personhood. The social death aspect of criminal slavery often proved more psychologically devastating than the physical hardships of forced labor. The possibility of manumission provides theoretical hope for criminal slaves who might eventually earn freedom through exceptional service. But most criminal slaves die in bondage because masters have little incentive to free valuable property that generates ongoing profits through forced labor. Freedom was legally possible, but practically unlikely for most criminal slaves.
Criminal slavery serves economic functions by providing essential labor for dangerous industries while generating profits that support Roman economic development, making punishment slavery a form of government-sponsored economic activity that converts criminal justice into productive enterprise. The economic benefits of criminal slavery created incentives for maintaining harsh legal systems that generated enslaved workers. The psychological effects of criminal slavery include the ongoing trauma of legal death, combined with continued physical existence, creating unique forms of suffering where individuals must adapt to complete powerlessness while maintaining enough psychological stability to survive indefinite bondage under potentially brutal conditions. Historians still argue whether Roman criminal slavery was primarily intended as punishment or economic exploitation, but the legal framework and practical implementation clearly indicate that these sentences served both functions while providing ongoing suffering that satisfied justice requirements through indefinite torment rather than quick execution. You're being led through the forum while wearing only a sign describing your crimes, as Roman public humiliation punishment transforms your social destruction into entertainment spectacle where crowds gather to mock, insult, and psychologically torture criminals whose dignity is systematically destroyed for the amusement of citizens who enjoy watching social inferiors suffer degradation. Public humiliation represents Roman understanding that social death can be more devastating than physical death, creating punishments that destroy reputations and social standing while keeping criminals alive to experience ongoing psychological torment. Your humiliation costume includes deliberate elements designed to maximize shame and ridicule, such as fool's caps, degrading signs, or symbolic objects that represent your specific crimes, while providing visual cues that encourage crowd participation in your psychological destruction. Roman authorities understood that effective humiliation required theatrical elements that communicated your disgrace clearly, while providing entertainment opportunities for spectators who enjoyed participating in criminal degradation. The public route for your humiliation parade includes stops at locations where your crimes occurred, markets where you conducted business, and residential areas where your former neighbors can observe your fall from social respectability, creating comprehensive shame experiences that destroy your reputation throughout Roman society while providing widespread entertainment for diverse audiences. The parade route was carefully planned to maximize both humiliation and public participation. Your crowd interaction during humiliation punishment includes verbal abuse, thrown objects, and various forms of public mockery from Roman citizens who view criminal degradation as legitimate entertainment that reinforces social hierarchies while providing opportunities to demonstrate their own moral superiority through participation in your psychological torture. Crowd participation transformed individual punishment into community activities that strengthen social bonds through shared cruelty. The psychological techniques used in Roman humiliation punishment include forced confession of crimes, public acknowledgement of shame, and ritualized submission to authority that destroys self-respect while demonstrating the consequences of challenging social order to audiences who learn appropriate behavior through observing criminal degradation. The psychological destruction was often more devastating than physical torture because it eliminated the possibility of maintaining dignity during punishment. Your forced performance during humiliation includes reciting your crimes, begging for forgiveness, and performing various degrading activities that entertain crowds while demonstrating your complete submission to Roman authority and social judgment. These performance requirements transformed punishment into interactive theater where your humiliation provided entertainment that educated audiences about justice and social control. The social consequences of public humiliation extend beyond the immediate punishment to create permanent stigma that makes normal social and economic relationships impossible, effectively eliminating your ability to participate in Roman society even after the formal punishment concludes. Public humiliation created ongoing punishment that continued long after the ceremonial degradation ended.
Humiliation punishment ceremonies include elements borrowed from religious rituals, theatrical performances, and military traditions that transform individual shame into community celebrations where your degradation strengthens social solidarity while providing entertainment that combines justice with festival atmosphere. The ceremonial framework made humiliation seem like necessary social maintenance rather than arbitrary cruelty. Your family members often face secondary humiliation through association with publicly disgraced criminals, creating collective punishment that extends shame to innocent relatives while demonstrating the social consequences of criminal behavior to broader community audiences. Family humiliation multiplied the punishment's effectiveness while providing additional entertainment for crowds who enjoyed watching entire families suffer social destruction.
The economic consequences of public humiliation include loss of business relationships, employment opportunities, and social connections that provide economic support, making humiliation punishment economically devastating, even when it doesn't include fines or property confiscation. The economic destruction often proved more damaging than financial penalties because it eliminated future earning capacity. The recovery from public humiliation requires rebuilding social relationships and reputation through years of effort that might never succeed, because Roman society maintained long memories about public disgrace and often refused to accept previously humiliated individuals back into normal social and economic relationships. Historians still argue whether Roman public humiliation was primarily intended as psychological punishment or social control, but the elaborate ceremonial framework and community participation clearly indicate that these punishments served important functions in maintaining social hierarchies and demonstrating the consequences of challenging established authority through memorable degradation spectacles. You're facing a Roman military tribunal where violation of strict army codes triggers punishments so severe they make civilian criminal justice seem merciful. Discovering that military discipline operates according to principles where unit effectiveness takes precedence over individual survival, and collective punishment ensures that soldiers police each other more effectively than any external authority. Military discipline extremes represent Roman organizational genius applied to the problem of maintaining order among armed men who could potentially overthrow the government if they chose to rebel against imperial authority. Your military crimes might include cowardice in battle, desertion from duty, insubordination to officers, or various forms of misconduct that threaten unit cohesion and military effectiveness, triggering specialized punishments designed specifically for soldiers who understand violence and might not be deterred by civilian penalties that seem mild compared to battlefield dangers. Roman military justice recognized that soldiers required different motivation than civilians because they faced death regularly and might view ordinary punishments as preferable to combat duty. The military punishment options include flogging with vine rods that cause excruciating pain without permanent disability, reduction in rank that destroys military career prospects, loss of pay and benefits that threatens economic survival, or transfer to punishment units where survival chances are minimal during high-risk assignments. Roman military commanders had extensive punishment menus that allowed precise calibration of discipline according to the severity of offenses and the need to maintain unit morale. Your court-martial proceedings include testimony from fellow soldiers who might face punishment themselves if they're suspected of covering up military crimes or failing to report misconduct. Creating legal environments where unit members are incentivized to provide damaging testimony against accused comrades rather than risk their own careers through misplaced loyalty. Military justice systems encouraged soldiers to prioritize institutional loyalty over personal relationships. The collective punishment aspects of military discipline include scenarios where entire units face reduced rations, canceled leave, extra duty assignments, or dangerous mission assignments because individual members committed offenses that reflect poorly on unit discipline and leadership effectiveness. Collective punishment created peer pressure systems where soldiers monitored each other's behavior more effectively than officers could through direct supervision. Your military execution options include crucifixion for desertion, beheading for treason, being beaten to death by fellow soldiers for cowardice, or various other methods specifically designed to demonstrate that military crimes trigger consequences more severe than civilian offenses because soldiers have sworn sacred oaths to defend the empire with their lives. Military executions served as powerful deterrents that reminded soldiers about the seriousness of their military commitments. The punishment unit assignments include transfer to auxiliary forces with minimal equipment and support, assignment to siege duty, where casualties are extremely high, or service in frontier garrisons, where survival depends on fighting hostile populations with inadequate resources. Punishment units provided alternatives to execution that still eliminated problem soldiers through assignments that were likely to result in death during military operations. Your military career prospects after surviving punishment include permanent stigma that prevents promotion, limits assignment opportunities, and marks you as unreliable for important duties that require trust and responsibility, making military punishment ongoing career damage that continues long after formal penalties are completed. Military punishment created permanent consequences that affected soldiers' entire military careers and post-service civilian opportunities. The psychological warfare aspects of military discipline include public punishments that demonstrate consequences to other soldiers while creating fear-based motivation that supplements patriotism, financial incentives, and unit loyalty in maintaining military order among men who are trained to use violence effectively. Military discipline relied on terror as much as honor to maintain unit effectiveness. Military punishment ceremonies include elements that reinforce military values, demonstrate chain of command authority, and provide educational experiences about proper soldier behavior while maintaining the theatrical spectacle that makes punishment memorable and effective as deterrent for other soldiers who witness the proceedings. The integration of military and civilian justice creates complex legal situations where soldiers face different courts, different penalties, and different legal protections than civilian citizens, making military service the form of voluntary legal subjugation where individuals surrender civilian rights in exchange for military careers and imperial service. Historians still argue whether Roman military discipline was primarily motivated by practical effectiveness or institutional control, but the severity and variety of military punishments clearly indicate that maintaining army loyalty was considered essential for imperial survival and required extreme measures to prevent military rebellion. You're being strapped to a table in a Roman medical facility, where your criminal sentence involves serving as human laboratory equipment for testing dangerous substances, experimental surgical procedures, and various toxic compounds that advance Roman medical and military knowledge, while slowly killing you through exposure to poisons, diseases, and experimental treatments that would be too dangerous to test on valuable citizens. Poison testing sentences represent Roman efficiency in converting criminal punishment into scientific research that eliminates unwanted individuals while generating useful knowledge for imperial military and medical applications. Your role as human test subject includes exposure to various plant extracts, mineral compounds, and animal venoms that Roman physicians and military researchers need to understand for developing both medicines and weapons, making your suffering a contribution to imperial knowledge that serves broader social purposes, while ensuring that your death provides maximum value to Roman society. Criminal poison testing transformed execution into educational opportunities that advanced Roman understanding of toxicology and pharmacology. The testing procedures involve careful documentation of your reactions to different substances, with Roman physicians recording symptoms, timeframes, and fatality rates that create scientific databases for future reference, making your death part of systematic research programs rather than random cruelty. Roman medical researchers understood that systematic poison testing required careful observation and record-keeping to generate useful scientific knowledge from criminal executions. Your testing facility includes basic medical equipment for monitoring your condition during experiments, primitive laboratory apparatus for preparing test substances, and documentation systems for recording results that will be used to develop military poisons, medicinal treatments, and various other applications that require understanding of toxic substances and their effects on human subjects. The research facilities demonstrated Roman commitment to systematic scientific investigation, The variety of substances tested on criminal subjects includes exotic plants from conquered territories, mineral compounds used in industrial processes, animal venoms collected from throughout the empire, and various synthetic preparations created by Roman chemists, who need to understand the toxic properties of their creations before using them for military or medical purposes. Criminal testing provided opportunities to experiment with dangerous substances that couldn't be tested safely on volunteer subjects. Your survival during poison testing depends partly on the specific substances being investigated and partly on the research objectives, with some experiments designed to establish lethal doses, while others focus on understanding non-fatal effects that might be useful for military applications, such as incapacitating enemies without killing them immediately. The research goals determined whether criminal subjects were expected to survive testing or die during the experimental process. The medical care provided to poison testing subjects includes basic treatments designed to keep you alive long enough to complete experimental protocols, with Roman physicians providing supportive care that maintains your health sufficiently to generate reliable research data without interfering with the testing objectives. Medical support was calibrated to serve research needs rather than humanitarian concerns. Your participation in poison research contributes to Roman military development of toxic weapons, medical advancement in understanding antidotes and treatments, and various other applications that make your suffering serve imperial interests while providing scientific knowledge that benefits Roman society at the cost of criminal lives. The research contributions provided justification for what might otherwise seem like pointless cruelty. The documentation of poison testing results includes detailed descriptions of symptoms, progression timelines, and fatality data that create comprehensive databases for Roman physicians and military commanders who need reliable information about toxic substances and their effects on human subjects under controlled experimental conditions. The scientific record-keeping transformed criminal execution into systematic research. Criminal poison testing serves multiple functions by eliminating unwanted individuals, advancing Roman medical knowledge, supporting military weapon development, and providing educational opportunities for Roman physicians who learn about toxicology through direct observation of experimental subjects who cannot refuse participation in dangerous research. The psychological effects of poison testing on criminal subjects include the ongoing terror of not knowing which substances might be administered, what effects they might cause, or whether any particular experiment might prove fatal, creating psychological torture that supplements the physical suffering caused by toxic exposure. Historians still argue whether Roman poison testing was primarily intended as punishment or scientific research, but the systematic documentation and practical applications clearly indicate that these experiments served important imperial functions while providing creative alternatives to traditional execution methods. You're being assigned to a construction crew building Rome's latest monumental project, where criminal punishment transforms into forced labor that might last decades if you survive long enough to see completion. Discovering that Roman engineering achievements were built on foundations of criminal bones and watered with the blood of condemned workers who died creating the architectural marvels that would define imperial civilization for millennia. Construction work death sentences represent Roman efficiency in converting criminal punishment into productive labor that eliminates unwanted individuals while creating the infrastructure, monuments, and public works that demonstrate imperial power and engineering expertise. Your construction assignment might involve quarrying massive stone blocks from distant mountains, hauling building materials across dangerous terrain, or working at dangerous heights on scaffolding systems that collapse regularly and kill workers who are considered expendable components of Roman engineering projects. Criminal construction workers faced the most dangerous assignments because their deaths were considered acceptable costs of monumental building rather than tragic accidents requiring prevention. The construction tools available to criminal workers include primitive equipment that requires enormous physical effort while providing minimal safety protection, making every construction task potentially fatal for workers who must meet daily quotas regardless of weather conditions, equipment failures, or personal injuries that would halt work in modern construction environments. Roman construction prioritized project completion over worker safety because criminal laborers could be replaced more easily than construction schedules could be extended. Your working conditions include exposure to extreme weather without adequate shelter, minimal food rations calculated to maintain work capacity without providing long-term health support, and medical care limited to basic treatments that keep workers functional rather than healthy or comfortable. Construction site conditions were designed to maximize productivity while minimizing costs associated with worker maintenance and support. The construction projects using criminal labor include aqueducts that require dangerous underground work, amphitheaters built with massive stone blocks that crush workers regularly, roads constructed across hostile terrain where workers face environmental dangers and military threats, and various other public works that advance Roman civilization through systematic sacrifice of criminal lives. These monuments represented criminal blood transformed into architectural achievement. Your survival chances on construction projects depend on physical strength, construction skills, and luck in avoiding the accidents that kill workers daily. But most criminal construction workers die within months of beginning their sentences because the work is designed to eliminate criminal populations while completing imperial building projects. Long-term survival required exceptional physical capability and considerable luck in assignment to less dangerous construction tasks. The construction supervision includes brutal overseers who use violence to maintain work pace and ensure that criminal workers meet daily quotas regardless of personal cost. Creating work environments where productivity requirements override all humanitarian considerations and worker deaths are treated as acceptable operational expenses. Construction overseers were evaluated based on project completion rather than worker welfare. Construction camp living conditions include overcrowded barracks with minimal sanitation, contaminated food and water supplies, and no medical facilities beyond basic injury treatment that keeps workers functional for continued labor rather than promoting actual health and recovery. Living conditions were calculated to maintain work capacity while minimizing support costs. Your construction work contributes to Roman architectural achievements that will be admired for centuries, while the criminal workers who built these monuments disappear from historical memory, making construction punishment a form of anonymous sacrifice where individual lives are consumed to create lasting imperial legacy. The monuments became memorials to imperial power rather than tributes to the workers who died building them. The technical skills required for Roman construction include sophisticated engineering knowledge, mathematical calculations, and specialized craftsmanship that criminal workers must learn quickly to survive their assignments, making construction sites educational environments where workers acquire valuable skills while facing constant danger from the work itself. Construction completion provides theoretical opportunities for sentence reduction or freedom for criminal workers who survive long enough to finish their assigned projects. But most construction sentences were designed to ensure worker death before project completion, making freedom a theoretical possibility rather than realistic expectation. Historians still argue whether Roman construction projects were primarily intended as public works or elaborate execution methods. But the high mortality rates and dangerous working conditions clearly indicate that criminal construction labor functioned as delayed execution disguised as productive punishment that served imperial building needs. You're watching in horror as Roman authorities arrest your entire family for crimes you committed alone, discovering that imperial justice extends punishment to innocent relatives who share your blood, your household, or simply your misfortune in being connected to someone who challenged Roman authority in ways that require comprehensive elimination of potential future threats. Family collective punishment represents Roman understanding that individual crimes often reflect broader social problems that require systematic solutions involving the destruction of entire kinship networks rather than simple elimination of individual criminals. Your family members face punishment ranging from execution to slavery to exile based on their relationship to you and their perceived threat to imperial security, with parents, spouses, and children receiving different sentences that reflect Roman legal theories about inherited criminality, family loyalty, and the social contamination that spreads through kinship ties. Roman authorities understood that family connections could create ongoing political problems that required preventive elimination of potential future enemies. The legal framework for collective family punishment includes complex regulations about which relatives face automatic punishment, which family members might be spared through cooperation with authorities, and how family property should be distributed among imperial officials who benefit from the economic destruction of criminal families. Roman law recognized that family destruction could be more effective than individual execution for eliminating long-term political threats. Your children's fate under collective punishment includes potential enslavement, adoption by loyal Roman families, or elimination through various methods designed to prevent them from seeking revenge for their parents' destruction when they reach adulthood, making family punishment a form of preventive genocide that eliminates future threats through systematic destruction of bloodlines. Children represented potential future enemies who required elimination or complete social reprogramming. The psychological warfare aspects of family collective punishment include forcing you to watch your relatives suffer for your crimes, creating emotional torture that supplements physical punishment while demonstrating the far-reaching consequences of challenging imperial authority to audiences who learn that resistance endangers not just individuals, but entire families. The psychological impact often proved more devastating than physical torture. Your spouse's punishment under collective family sentencing might include forced remarriage to loyal Romans, enslavement to imperial households, or execution depending on their perceived complicity in your crimes and their potential value as political assets or threats to imperial security. Spousal punishment served multiple functions, including revenge, prevention, and redistribution of marriage relationships that supported imperial interests. The property confiscation aspects of family collective punishment include seizure of all family assets, redistribution of land and wealth to loyal supporters, and economic destruction that eliminates the material foundation for potential future resistance while providing rewards for imperial supporters who benefit from criminal family destruction. Economic elimination ensured that family destruction was complete and permanent. Family collective punishment ceremonies include public events where entire families face justice simultaneously, creating spectacular demonstrations of imperial power while providing educational entertainment for Roman audiences who learn about the comprehensive consequences of challenging established authority through resistance that endangers innocent relatives. The public nature of family destruction maximized its deterrent effect. Your extended family members, including cousins, uncles, and distant relatives, might face investigation, surveillance, or preventive punishment based on Roman theories about inherited political tendencies and family loyalty networks that could support future resistance activities. Extended family punishment created comprehensive elimination systems that destroyed entire kinship networks rather than individual criminals. The social consequences of family collective punishment include the complete elimination of family names, lineages, and social connections that might preserve memory of destroyed families or provide foundation for future revenge activities, making collective punishment a form of social erasure that eliminated criminal families from historical memory as well as physical existence. Family destruction was designed to be complete and permanent. The economic benefits of family collective punishment include redistribution of criminal family wealth to loyal supporters, elimination of economic competition from destroyed families, and prevention of inherited wealth that might support future resistance activities against imperial authority. Economic motives often influenced the scope and severity of family punishment. The religious justification for family collective punishment includes Roman beliefs about inherited guilt, family contamination, and divine justice that requires comprehensive purification of criminal bloodlines through systematic destruction of entire kinship networks, rather than simple individual punishment that might leave spiritual contamination unresolved. Historians still argue whether Roman family collective punishment was primarily motivated by political security or economic opportunity, but the systematic nature of family destruction clearly indicates that these punishments served multiple imperial functions while demonstrating the comprehensive consequences of challenging Roman authority through resistance that endangered innocent relatives. You're experiencing Roman creative ironic justice, where your punishment is specifically designed to mirror your crime through elaborate symbolic retribution that transforms justice into theatrical performance, combining poetic symbolism with practical execution. Discovering that Roman legal imagination could create punishments so perfectly matched to specific offenses that they served as educational demonstrations about moral philosophy, while providing entertainment that satisfied audiences' appreciation for artistic justice. Creative, ironic punishment represents Roman intellectual sophistication applied to criminal justice, creating execution methods that were simultaneously practical, symbolic, and dramatically satisfying for spectators who appreciated the artistic elements of well-designed retribution. Your punishment design reflects careful analysis of your specific crime to create symbolic correspondence between offense and penalty, with Roman legal scholars developing elaborate theoretical frameworks for matching punishments to crimes through metaphorical relationships that demonstrate cosmic justice while providing intellectually satisfying entertainment for educated audiences who understood the symbolic connections. Roman ironic justice required sophisticated cultural knowledge and legal expertise to create punishments that functioned as both practical execution and artistic performance. The symbolic elements of your ironic punishment include props, costumes, and staging that recreate aspects of your original crime, while inverting the power relationships to demonstrate divine justice through role reversal, making your execution a dramatic performance where you experience the consequences of your actions through carefully choreographed scenarios that educate audiences about moral cause and effect. The theatrical framework transformed punishment into educational entertainment that combined justice with cultural sophistication. Your participation in ironic punishment involves forced reenactment of your crimes, with yourself cast as the victim rather than perpetrator, creating dramatic scenarios where justice is demonstrated through experiential education that shows audiences the moral consequences of criminal behavior through symbolic representation rather than simple execution. These reenactments required careful scripting and staging to ensure that the symbolic message was clear to spectators. The intellectual sophistication of Roman ironic justice includes complex legal theories about symbolic representation, moral education, and divine justice that justify elaborate punishment ceremonies through philosophical frameworks that make creative execution seem like necessary moral instruction, rather than arbitrary cruelty disguised as entertainment. Roman legal scholars developed extensive theoretical justifications for symbolic punishment that demonstrated intellectual sophistication while providing practical guidance for punishment design. Your punishment ceremony attracts educated audiences who appreciate the intellectual content of symbolic justice, while providing entertainment that combines moral instruction with dramatic performance, making ironic punishment a form of high culture that appeals to sophisticated spectators who understand the philosophical and artistic elements of well-designed retribution. These audiences valued intellectual content as much as dramatic spectacle. The artistic elements of ironic punishment include careful attention to visual presentation, dramatic timing, and symbolic detail that transform execution into performance art, where your death becomes the climax of carefully constructed narrative that demonstrates moral principles through memorable, dramatic presentation. Roman punishment artists specialized in creating visually and intellectually satisfying execution spectacles. Creative ironic justice serves educational purposes by demonstrating abstract moral principles through concrete dramatic examples that make philosophical concepts accessible to general audiences while providing sophisticated entertainment for educated spectators who appreciate the intellectual sophistication of symbolic punishment design. The educational content justified elaborate execution methods through their cultural and moral value. Your ironic punishment contributes to Roman cultural development by creating memorable examples of artistic justice that influence legal theory, dramatic arts, and moral philosophy, while providing practical demonstrations of imperial power through sophisticated cultural expression rather than simple violence. These punishments became cultural artifacts that influenced Roman intellectual development. The psychological impact of ironic punishment on both participants and spectators creates complex emotional responses where entertainment, education, and justice combine to produce culturally sophisticated experiences that reinforce social values while providing intellectual satisfaction for audiences who appreciate artistic achievement in execution design. The psychological effects were carefully calculated to maximize cultural impact. The legal precedent created by successful ironic punishments influences future punishment design by establishing standards for symbolic appropriateness, artistic quality, and educational effectiveness that guide Roman legal authorities in developing new forms of creative justice that maintain cultural sophistication while serving practical execution needs. The philosophical implications of Roman ironic justice include complex questions about the relationship between justice and art, the role of symbolic representation in legal systems, and the cultural functions of sophisticated execution methods that demonstrate imperial civilization through intellectual achievement rather than simple brutality. Historians still argue whether Roman creative ironic justice was primarily intended as legal innovation or cultural expression, but the elaborate intellectual framework and artistic sophistication clearly indicate that these punishments served important functions in Roman cultural development while providing practical solutions to criminal justice needs through intellectually satisfying execution methods. You're beginning to understand the comprehensive psychological architecture that made Roman punishment systems so terrifyingly effective at maintaining imperial control across millions of diverse people who might otherwise have rebelled against foreign domination. Discovering that Rome's creative brutality wasn't random sadism, but carefully calculated terror designed to create fear-based social control that penetrated every level of society while providing entertainment that made imperial violence seem like necessary cultural activity. The psychology of Roman terror represents sophisticated understanding of human behavior applied to the practical problem of governing vast territories through systematic intimidation that made rebellion seem hopeless while making submission appear rational and even enjoyable. Your exposure to Roman punishment psychology reveals how imperial authorities understood that effective terror required variety, creativity, and public participation to create lasting fear that would influence behavior long after specific executions ended, making Roman punishment systems educational programs that taught entire populations about the consequences of resistance through memorable demonstrations of imperial power. Roman psychological warfare recognized that the fear generated by punishment was more valuable than the actual deaths, creating terror systems designed to maximize psychological impact rather than simple elimination of enemies. The systematic nature of Roman terror includes carefully designed escalation patterns where minor crimes trigger minor punishments, while serious offenses produce elaborate spectacles that demonstrate the range of suffering available to imperial authorities, who can calibrate punishment severity according to political needs and audience expectations. This systematic approach created predictable terror that allowed people to understand exactly what consequences they faced for different levels of resistance, while ensuring that imperial responses seemed proportional rather than arbitrary. Your understanding of Roman punishment effectiveness includes recognition that these systems succeeded in maintaining imperial control for centuries by creating social environments where cooperation with imperial authority seemed like the only rational choice for people who understood the comprehensive consequences of resistance through direct observation of criminal punishment. The effectiveness of Roman terror lay in its ability to make submission seem logical rather than cowardly. The cultural integration of punishment into Roman social life includes the transformation of execution into entertainment that made imperial violence seem like normal cultural activity rather than political oppression, creating social environments where citizens enthusiastically participated in state terror while viewing their participation as legitimate entertainment rather than complicity in systematic brutality. This cultural integration made Roman terror self-sustaining through popular support. Your recognition of Roman terror's sophistication includes understanding how imperial authorities combined practical execution needs with entertainment value, educational content, and cultural sophistication to create punishment systems that served multiple social functions simultaneously, while providing justification for what might otherwise seem like pointless cruelty. Roman terror was multifunctional by design rather than accident. The long-term psychological effects of Roman punishment systems include the creation of cultural attitudes toward authority, violence, and justice that influenced Roman society for generations, while providing models for social control that would be studied and imitated by future empires, seeking effective methods for governing diverse populations through systematic intimidation. Roman terror created lasting cultural changes that extended far beyond immediate political control. Roman punishment psychology demonstrates how sophisticated understanding of human behavior could be applied to create terror systems that were simultaneously brutal and culturally acceptable, making imperial violence seem like necessary justice rather than political oppression, while providing entertainment that made citizens willing participants in state terror rather than reluctant subjects of imperial authority. The imperial success of Roman terror systems provides historical evidence that well-designed punishment can create stable political control across diverse populations for extended periods, making Roman punishment psychology a case study in effective authoritarianism that demonstrates both the possibilities and the costs of government through systematic intimidation rather than popular consent. Your journey through Roman punishment reveals how creative brutality could be transformed into sophisticated cultural institution that served multiple social functions while maintaining political control through terror that seemed both necessary and entertaining to populations who participated willingly in their own intimidation. The legacy of Roman punishment psychology includes influences on legal systems, entertainment culture, and political theory that continue to shape human society long after the empire that created these systems disappeared, making Roman terror a permanent contribution to human knowledge about social control through systematic violence. As the weight of Roman brutality settles into your consciousness like evening shadows across ancient streets, you find yourself grateful for the gentle darkness that surrounds your modern rest, where justice has evolved beyond creative cruelty into systems that seek rehabilitation rather than retribution, where entertainment doesn't require human suffering, and where the rule of law protects rather than terrorizes ordinary people. The soft comfort of your bed represents centuries of human progress away from the systematic terror that once defined civilization, creating peaceful spaces where sleep comes without fear of arbitrary punishment or creative execution. Tonight, as you drift into dreams unmarked by the screams of ancient amphitheaters, you can appreciate the quiet mercy of living in times when justice serves humanity rather than demanding its sacrifice for the entertainment of emperors and the maintenance of imperial power through calculated terror that made survival itself a form of submission to authority that had mastered the art of making brutality seem both necessary and beautiful.